Hey there, Cinemaster fans. Hope you're ready for some movie magic. Let's dive right in. Our movie starts with a very strange event. We see a planet shattering and filling with heat as if it's being destroyed. Then, we see a strange glowing meteor heading toward Earth. It passes by a bay in Japan, freezing it completely. It flies over the pyramids in Giza, Egypt, turning the weather icy all of a sudden. It then passes over Los Angeles, California, cutting off all electricity and devices. News of these events spreads on TV, and we see Reed and Susan watching from the airport. They're preparing for their wedding, which, unfortunately, has become a major media event. The whole world is interested in attending and watching them prepare for their wedding, which has sadly become a significant media spectacle. This irritates Susan a bit, as she wonders where their private life has gone. But Reed tries to calm her down, assuring her that everything will be fine and they'll live well. Later, an employee informs them that the VIP seats are all taken, so they'll have to settle for economy seats. Reed agrees, and they decide to squeeze into the plane. Johnny decides to follow them flying. They arrive at the Fantastic Four headquarters, where Susan is very busy with the wedding. But it seems Reed isn't as interested because he's focused on his work. Apparently, he's invented something strange, which we'll find out about later. We also learn that Reed has secretly been researching the recent events without Susan knowing, so as not to stress her further. He's discussing it with Johnny, but this turns out to be a bad idea because Johnny uses the secret to blackmail Reed into throwing him a bachelor party. Eventually, Reed agrees. Next, we see Victor waking up from his frozen state. Then, we go to the party, where everyone is happy. The women flock around Reed. Meanwhile, General Hager, accompanied by 2 assistants, heads to the Fantastic Four building, only to find it empty. He asks for Reed, but Susan meets him instead, as Reed isn't there. The general tells her to take him to Reed immediately. At that moment, Reed is having fun with the women, dancing and using his stretching abilities to impress the crowd. But then the general and Susan walk in. Susan is, of course, very upset to find a girl in Reed's arms. Reed tries to explain the situation. In the end, the general takes Reed aside and tells him something important is happening. They go to a restaurant, where the general explains that the object seen flying through the sky isn't a meteor. It's something they can't identify, and they need Reed's help. The general shows him photos of the object, which appears to be strange and filled with immense energy. Additionally, mysterious craters have started appearing in the ground in various locations. Reed suggests building a sensor device to pinpoint the object's exact location. The general agrees and urges Reed to start working on it immediately. But Reed refuses, saying he has a wedding on Saturday and can't miss it. Susan is thrilled that, for the first time, Reed is prioritizing their life over work. The general leaves with one of his assistants, and Johnny tries to flirt with her but fails. Later, we see someone helping Victor escape from his containment. As soon as Victor is free, he kills his helper as a thank you. We then learn that Reed has secretly started working on the sensor device without Susan knowing. We see Ben working on the device too, while Reed keeps it hidden from Susan. The wedding day arrives, and the entire country is focused on the event. But Susan is very anxious, wondering how they can live like this. Even if the day goes smoothly, how will they build a family amidst all the chaos, enemies, monsters, and people constantly watching them? Alicia, Ben's girlfriend, tries to reassure her. Ben rushes to Reed saying, "There's only an hour left until the wedding and you're still working on your device." Reed replies, "Just one more moment and the device will be ready." He activates the device, only to realize he's late for the wedding. He collapses from the shock, and Ben drags him away to get ready quickly. Meanwhile, Victor is investigating the strange being, seemingly one step ahead of Reed. We see Susan in her wedding dress, with Johnny trying not to be too annoying. He jokes that the priest will be late. He takes her by the hand to start the ceremony. As they stand together and the officiant begins to speak, a small device connected to the sensor gives off a signal indicating something strange is happening. Reed asks the officiant to hurry up, which annoys Susan a bit, but her irritation vanishes when something far more important happens. The strange being crashes their wedding, cutting off all power sources. Even the helicopter filming the wedding loses control and crashes toward the guests. Of course, the Fantastic Four save the day. The being appears and Johnny chases after. A fast, intense, and challenging pursuit ensues. In the end, Johnny catches up to it, but surprisingly, the being grabs him instead. It takes him into outer space and drops him from above. Johnny lands in the Arabian desert. It becomes clear that the being was merely a servant following orders from an unseen master. Johnny explains what happened to his team. Reed believes the being came to destroy the sensor device, knowing they were tracking it and wanting to prevent that. Reed realizes they must stay one step ahead, though he doesn't yet know how. A heated argument erupts between Susan and Reed over their ruined day. Johnny struggles with his powers, unable to control them as before. He decides to jump off a building, hoping his abilities won't fail him, but he falls. Susan rushes to him, and when she touches him, their powers switch. She gains Johnny's fire abilities and starts flying and burning. Reed tries to help but doesn't know what to do. Eventually, Susan manages to stop the fire, but not without causing chaos. Back at the lab, they realize Johnny can now transfer his powers to anyone he touches. Ben jokingly tries it, leading to a hilarious scene before quickly switching back. Reed decides Johnny must be isolated because the situation is too dangerous. Later, we see Susan watching the news, and she talks about the destruction of her joy and how life is cursed for them, which bothers her a lot. She tells Reed about her problem and how they can live after this, even if today passes. Reed eventually tells her that he is ready for them to live a normal life after completing this mission and discovering what this being is. He plans to work as a professor at any college and live a life of building a family. However, this would negatively affect Ben and Johnny. Johnny overhears them and becomes very upset. At this point, we see the supernatural being in an icy location, and it is clear that Victor has managed to locate it and goes to talk to it. More precisely, he welcomes it and tells it that if they unite, they can control the world. The being strikes him with its special power, slamming him into a wall. At the same time, Victor's body returns to its normal state. Meanwhile, Johnny goes to Ben and tells him what he overheard from Reed and Susan's conversation. Naturally, they are very upset because the matter concerns all of them, not just the two of them. But then Reed appears and informs them of a new disaster. He tells them that upon reviewing what the being has been doing, he realized that the sequence of its actions resembles the beginning of a plan to destroy and explode the planet. Now, they are in extreme danger. However, there is an important point regarding the sequence. These actions follow a certain system, a mathematical formula, and a specific area. This allows them to determine the next location. Without delay, they inform the general and take helicopters to the site in London, near Big Ben. There, a strange hole begins to form in the water, similar to the previous one. Suddenly, a wave-like shock destroys the foundation of the place and wrecks the amusement ride there. Its wheel starts to fall, and Susan tries to hold it with her superpowers. From below, Ben supports her, and Reed helps from another side, urging people to evacuate quickly. Johnny spots the strange being and decides to chase it, but unfortunately, he collides with Reed, causing their powers to switch. This disrupts the ride's stability and Susan can no longer hold it. But at the last moment, Reed comes up with an idea and tells Ben if he can lift the wheel slightly higher and push it further, Reed can use his firepower to weld the wheel's axis. The mission succeeds. However, the general is very annoyed by what happened, accusing them of being chaotic and questioning how such issues could arise during a live mission. Suddenly, they notice that the river has dried up. Since the general is frustrated, he decides to involve Victor. Ben is furious because Victor was the villain in the first movie, but the general explains that Victor surrendered himself to them, claiming to have information about the being and offering to help. He has extended a hand and awaits their cooperation. At this point, we see that Victor had recorded a video of the incident between him and the being. This video provides a clear view of the being, allowing them to deduce that its power emanates from the board it rides on. Thus, the plan must focus on separating it from this board. Later, we see Johnny and Ben sitting together, upset about what happened and the idea that Reed and Susan want to separate from the group. Meanwhile, Reed is at his wit's end. The whole world expects something from him, and he doesn't even know what it is. Susan tries to calm him down with romantic words, saying they have become one and their heartbeats are identical. Suddenly, he gets an idea about the pulse. There must be a specific pulse controlling the device. If they can interrupt this pulse, they can separate the being from the board. He begins working on a device that can deliver a shock to stop the pulse for a few seconds. At the same time, Victor is working on a different device, but no one knows what it is. Susan catches him but can't find anything incriminating, so she leaves. Later, Johnny tries to flirt with the military woman again, but she tells him she doesn't see any bad boy appeal in him. She only sees someone who almost destroyed his team with his recklessness and irresponsible actions. They then head to the location of the next hole, which they were able to pinpoint. There, Reed prepares to deploy his device, but the general expresses his lack of trust in Reed, mocking him. Reed asserts himself, reminding the general that he is one of the world's leading scientists and a member of the Fantastic Four. Ultimately, Reed proceeds with his plan. Each member of the Fantastic Four places a device at a part of the hole, waiting for the strange being to arrive. Everyone activates their devices except Susan, who is surprised by the being's sudden arrival. She tries to stop it with her force field, but it easily penetrates it. She asks it what it wants and why it aims to destroy Earth. It tells her it is forced to do so, that it has no choice, and that it is not the real threat. At this moment, the general gathers his forces and launches the first missiles toward the being. However, the being protects Susan and absorbs the missiles. While it is busy deflecting the missiles, Susan manages to activate the last device. They succeed in interrupting its pulse and separating it from the board. Military forces then arrive and take the being to what appears to be a torture facility in Siberia. The general tells Reed that their role is over and that the rest is up to them. The team is locked in one room while the being is taken to another for interrogation. Its board is sent elsewhere. Susan tells the team that the being claimed it was not the villain and that it must be telling the truth because it saved her life. Reed agrees they need to talk to the being, but the general won't allow it. Thus, they decide to sneak in. Johnny creates a distraction, engaging the guard in conversation while the others manage to break out and see what is happening to the being. Meanwhile, Victor requests to speak with the general. The general pauses everything for a 5-minute break and steps out. This gives Susan the opportunity to speak with the being. It tells her that it is not the true villain and that the real threat is named Galactus, a being that consumes planets to survive. It serves Galactus in exchange for sparing its planet and people. It insists it has no choice, but Susan tells it there is always a choice, delivering a speech filled with human compassion. Later, we see the general speaking with Victor, who tells him, "I have revoked the agreement on my end. Now it's your move," because he wanted to experiment on the board. And indeed, he takes him there. As soon as he enters, he says to him, "General, sometimes Dredd is right and destroys everyone." This is when they decide to break their silence because they need to catch that creature now. Ben heads to the guard to start the operation. At that moment, we see Victor putting on his armor again and wearing the device he crafted, which apparently creates an artificial pulse suitable for the board so they can synchronize with each other. As soon as he mounts it, he feels an incredible surge of energy. They try to stop him with bullets, but with a single touch, he shatters them. Then Victor unleashes all the energy inside him, blowing up a large part of the place. A giant rock crashes into Ben, and a massive Reed is behind him. They run and discover that the device has been taken. They realize that Victor has turned rogue. Now they need to chase him, but it's a very difficult task. At this point, Reed reveals one of his inventions, which turns out to be a vehicle he had built. He orders it via the device he has, and the Fantastic Four set out, taking the nearby creature with them. They encounter the girl Johnny had been trying to impress. He speaks to her honestly, saying that they now need to protect the world. She believes them and lets them go. They quickly climb the stairs to the roof. The vehicle Reed had called arrives. It's the Fantastic Four's vehicle with 4 seats, so the creature takes Johnny's place. Johnny flies beside them. We learn that Victor is heading to China, so they follow him. At this moment, the creature decides to talk to Susan. He tells her his name is Norin. He was probably shy about his name, but okay. He begins to tell her that they really need to save the world. Then the first confrontation with Victor occurs, with Johnny who throws him into the sea. But Victor manages to draw water from the sea, extinguishing Johnny's fire instantly. Reed believes they need to split up. He manages to separate his aircraft into 3 parts, each heading in a different direction to confuse Victor. They succeed in surrounding him, but Victor retaliates, throwing them all into the city. At this point, Victor creates an arrow out of nothing and throws it at Norin, but Susan decides to protect him. The arrow pierces her body because it was stronger than her shield, and she falls unconscious. The bigger disaster is that Galactus has begun his attack on Earth, with only minutes left before he consumes the planet. Reed says, "This means we need to set aside our emotions and act now." He thinks and realizes that Victor must have a device to send pulses to control the board. What they need now is to stop that device. But how, when each of them is weaker than him? We need to unite as one force. At this point, Johnny adds, "Why not become one body as well?" They put their hands together, allowing Johnny to absorb all their powers and become the bearer of all 4 powers combined. He confronts Victor, flying with fire, and strikes him with a powerful punch, launching him away. A massive battle ensues between them, with blows exchanged until, finally, using his elastic ability, Reed wraps around Victor's body, striking him with Ben's powerful punches and igniting him with intense heat, until the device in Victor's hand malfunctions and the board falls. Ben, in his normal form, climbs the scaffolding and delivers the final blow to Victor, disarming him and throwing him into the sea. At this moment, Galactus enters Earth's atmosphere, and it seems like everything is over. But here, Norin feels the need to act. He summons the shield with the pulses he has and mounts it, using a large portion of his power to bring Susan back to life. Then he tells Dredd, "Tell her you were right. In the end, it was just our choice." He flies at full speed toward Galactus, and when he feels the air is too strong for him, he finds Johnny behind him, supporting him, until he enters Galactus's core. But it seems like it's all over. The places begin to collapse, and the streets are destroyed. Galactus has arrived, and we are too late. But no, Norin reaches Galactus's core and says, "I will no longer serve you, and this will be the end for both of us." He gathers all the power within him and the board, exploding himself inside Galactus's core. Both of them explode with a blinding light that spreads across the Earth. Afterward, energy returns to all the places, and Susan wakes up, asking, "Did I miss anything?" Then they begin to celebrate and embrace, realizing that life is good. They decide that this team cannot be separated, because without their unity, the ending wouldn't have been so happy. This doesn't stop Susan and Reed from getting married and living a normal life. But they are not ready for a big wedding. They decide to marry quietly in China. As they stand before the marriage officiant, just as he begins to speak, Reed's device goes off again. But it's fine. Susan is now up to the responsibility and the situation. She asks the officiant, "Could you summarize, please?" He starts from the middle of the speech, but Reed interrupts. So the officiant says, "All right, just put the ring on her finger." They kiss, and they board their plane to take off. But before boarding, Susan decides to throw the bouquet. Among the girls catching the bouquet is the military woman Johnny had been trying to impress. She is excited and eagerly waiting for the bouquet. But Johnny isn't the marrying type, so he burns it in the air. They board the plane and take off, forming the Fantastic Four symbol in the sky. And that was the end of the movie. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.